Hi everyone, it's Isaac Smolden, the production manager here at My House. Today's episode of My Voice is a little bit longer and also a little more uncensored than it would normally be. We are dealing with some pretty heavy and serious stuff, and so on top of our normal explicit content warning, just a reminder that if you have any small children that you are listening with, or if you are someone that struggles with substance abuse or sexual abuse, this episode may be especially triggering. Without any further ado, here's Mike and our guest with the 10th episode of My Voice. My Voice is a chance for those who have struggled with addiction, homelessness, depression, and domestic violence to have a candid conversation about their life experience, current situation, and future goals and aspirations. Every episode is conducted anonymously to facilitate a comfortable and safe place for guests to tell their story. My Voice is hosted by Mike Sisson, who works as a case manager at the My House facilities in Wasilla, Alaska. We now join a My Voice conversation, already in progress.
If the zompocalypse started today, where is the first place you would go and why?
I would actually go to the Army surplus stores and raid those first, because then you get the majority of the crazies out from the grocery stores. And then actually, instead of hitting the grocery stores, I would go to farms so I could loot what I can carry from there, and it'll regrow eventually. And I'm not going to take the surplus of a farm, right? So instead of getting stuff that's going to be perishable long term and not very nutritious or healthy to sustain me, that's what I do. So,
excellent. Where were you born?
I was born in Anchorage, Alaska.
Have you lived in Alaska your entire life?
I have not. So when I was roughly 2 years old, my biological mother and my biological father had split up. There was a lot of domestic violence that caused my mom to take me and my older brother to California to go live with who eventually became my stepdad. They were all friends in high school, so they knew each other pretty well. Then from there, my stepdad was a staff sergeant in the Army, and we got stationed in Fort Hood, Texas. So I lived there for a couple of years on base, and then we eventually got our own home in Killeen, Texas, which is just outside of Fort Hood. Then when I was around 11, my dad had fought for custody again for me and my brother once he was able to financially afford to do so. Then we moved back up to Alaska. Originally, the custody agreement was that I was going to be spending summers here in Wasilla with my dad and school years in Anchorage with my mother. Due to my mom's own personal reasons, she chose to leave state. So I ended up moving in full-time with my biological dad, and I've kind of been here since. So,
all right. So you moved around quite a bit, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Pretty good number of times.
Yeah, decent amount. Yeah, I mean, my mom's mental health was interesting because my mom, I figured out later in life, I put two and two together, that my mom would basically, in order to get bills paid and to feed her addiction, she would sell herself in a sense. Mm-hmm. And that was really hard to realize as a teenager later on in life. You know, growing up, I didn't know that was weird. I didn't really know that moms laying in bed all day was not okay. Or not normal, I guess. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that, I always got told that, siblings look out for each other, you take care of each other. I didn't realize that, I knew it was kind of weird when my little brother started calling me mom before he called my mother mom. That was a little weird. By this point, I hadn't had any contact with my biological dad since I was about 5 years old, right when we moved to Texas, and that was really hard. I remember having no contact, anything like that, and then one day I was checking the mail, to get outside and stuff like that, because I just stayed inside all day taking care of the girls, and I went and checked it, and then there were 2 letters, one for me and one for my brother. And me and my brother never got mail. And then I saw who it was from, and I knew my dad's name. So I brought them to my mom, and my mom just, like, the look of fear on her face was crazy. I still remember it in my brain. And we got to open them. Inside was some cash, a call card, I think a gift, just, like, ways to contact him, basically, phone numbers. And my mom told us at that point it was up to us whether or not we were to call him. My brother wanted nothing to do with him. My mom, there was a lot of things my mom said that didn't really add up over time. So I'm not sure what's real and what's not. I think my mom, in the midst of her addiction, got a lot of things confused. I think there's some validity to some of her stories, but I wasn't there. I couldn't tell you.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember, like, sitting in our backyard thinking, really contemplating life. And I decided to call my dad. And I still remember.
And you're 11 at this point?
I was about 10 at this point. I hadn't turned 11 yet. And I called my dad. He picked up the phone and he's like, hello. I was just like, hi, Daddy. And just the pause, like the silence for like a solid 30 seconds. And you could hear like just the breaking of his voice when he said, hey. I ended up staying on the phone with him for about an hour. And so from there started the custody battle that my parents got into again that ended up in us moving up to Alaska. It came right at the time that my stepdad was either going to continue his contract with the military or honorably discharge. He chose to discharge, and we moved up. And I spent, to my memory, a really good summer with my dad. It was the first time I had lived in a home for a while where the adults weren't arguing and they weren't drunk all the time. My stepdad's also an alcoholic. So it was really just normalized for me. So it was weird that, like, my parents' dad and his fiance at the time, they hadn't quite been married. It was weird that they could go days without even having a debate, really. It was definitely it was kind of just waiting for that shoe to drop. Like, every time they would start debating, it's like, okay, when you guys going to start screaming? Right when I went to go stay with my mom for the school year, we had been living in my grandma's lower part of her house. We were all kind of sharing one room because that's what we didn't really have, like, a place to live yet. And my stepdad had ordered pizza for dinner because he didn't want to cook. And my mom used that as an excuse to get into a really big fight, which previously wouldn't have been different for us. It would have been pretty normal, but we had spent 3 months without that. And me and my brother got super overwhelmed, and we were like, we just want to go back to our dad's. So after my stepdad left for the night, he went to go stay with his friend. My mom packed me and the kids up, and we went to Wasilla, where my mom was going to go stay with her sister who lived there, and she dropped us off in the Fred Meyer's parking lot and left. And we just waited for my dad to get there. It was like midnight, super unsafe. But then my dad came and got us, and it was, I want to say, like August of that year, and by that Thanksgiving, my mom had fled state. She sent my stepdad a text message stating where the car was, where the keys were, and she was gone. And that I didn't know that was the last time I was going to see my mom.
Now, at this point, you're back in Alaska. Your mom left. How old are you now?
By the time my mom left, I was 11 years old.
Okay.
And I had no idea who my dad was other than the person that I'd been around in these small stints of time. My dad didn't know me, didn't know my brother. We just weren't around each other. The person who had raised me my whole life was just gone. And the person who I called dad, my stepdad, he'd been there to raise me, he was gone too, and I wasn't around my siblings anymore other than my brother. And it was just a very traumatic period of time as far as just the abandonment and the confusion and the anger and the loss. Yeah, it was very confusing.
So, by the age of 11, you had been through some substantial trauma and had to do things like take care of your siblings. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about a gut punch. On top of all of that, then you get what you just explained, confusion, abandonment, at least the chaos, you had the people that you knew.
Yeah.
And then now here you are. So I can't imagine the next couple of years were very, very good for you.
So the first year actually was pretty all right. It was still very confusing. I was really angry at my mother.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize the effect that obviously so was my dad and my stepmom, who they got married that September. My stepmom, how they talked about my mother, I didn't realize how that would affect me later. They were very negative and degrading, just not very nice, which, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of nice things to say, but, there was no respect at all in there. And so I allowed, for me at the time, I just fed into it. I was like, yeah, that's fine. I get it. And it kind of fueled my rage for a minute. But the first year was okay. We did fun things. We had family game nights. Up until, my stepmom kind of, her mental health started to deteriorate. She had her own mental health issues that were not in check. And that's kind of when the emotional abuse started. It was really hard because I went from being in a very noticeably chaotic home to a very behind hidden doors chaotic home. To anybody looking in, my family was middle class, they had good jobs, they were good standing in the community, it was just me and my brother coming from a troubled home, that was our issue. We were the issue. It wasn't anything out of that ordinary.
Right. Upstanding family. You should be grateful.
Exactly.
That type of mindset. Yeah.
You're kissing my feet and it's not good enough,
Right.
things like that. But, I went from, being an A+ student all throughout elementary school. Now instead of getting to go to that charter school that I was really excited about, I get shuttled off to Wasilla Middle. And because, I can't expect my dad to commute 5 days a week to come get us from school. That didn't make any sense. And I remember when they told us that, I started crying. I was an incredibly emotional child. And that was the first time my stepmom looked at me, scoffed, and said, "Odessa, shut up. You need to just stop." My dad didn't say anything. And, that was kind of the response to a lot of my emotions as a kid, because I was a lot. I was very explosive in my emotions. And what I know now to be BPD, it makes sense, borderline personality disorder. And, that's just, it's a part of how my brain is. I was not taught how to regulate emotions by my family. So in turn, that's how I reacted. I reacted completely on emotion. And, it turned into, I remember the first time I had a panic attack that I knew was a panic attack. I had gotten pretty triggered because I had a friend over and I had my window open and my dad and my brother were in an argument, and I heard my dad smack my brother, and it instantly triggered me. From when we were living with my mom, there was a lot of physical abuse that happened, and my brother ran off because he got triggered for sure. And then I had my panic attack, and I begged my dad to just let me go stay at my friend's house. I didn't want to be there. I didn't feel safe. And that was the first time my dad told me, "I'm tired of this teenage bullshit." I got to stay at my friend's house that night. Her dad had to put me on suicide watch. It's pretty bad. I was 13, maybe even 12. I was really young. I was stupid young. And then my parents picked me up at 6:30 a.m. And I got screamed at the entire way home, being told that I'm not to use my mental health as a crutch, and how embarrassing it was for my dad to have to feel that way because I didn't feel safe with him. All from my stepmom, of course. She's not even wearing a seatbelt, turned around screaming inches from my face. And so that morning, I got grounded, and I had to go collect trash and rocks at the park across the street because they didn't want to look at me. And I remember repeating in my head for over an hour, don't feel so you don't get hurt. That was around the time I also had started self-harming because I was hiding my emotions on a regular basis already at that point. Like I was in therapy, but I was too scared that the therapist would talk to my parents. So I would just kind of hide everything down. And self-harm at the time was tangible, something I could control, release. And it very much became an addiction very early on. It was technically my first addiction. And then my parents became foster parents.
Your parents started foster care. Did they do that for the remainder of the time that you were under their roof?
Yes and no. So I remember coming home one day after my parents got their certification, and there was a 3-day-old baby whose mother was in active addiction. She was an intravenous drug user. And so that little girl had a half-brother that was a ward of the state. And he actually went to middle school with me. So this boy who I'd gone to school with moves in, and I didn't really have much of a relationship with my older brother. He never really liked me growing up. Like, we were definitely siblings, but we were not friends by any means. We had a very strained relationship. And so I really wanted this kid to be like my older brother, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I really wanted to get along with him. Some things got twisted in the mix, and a lot of trauma started to happen after that. That was very hidden. At this point in time, I had started smoking cigarettes a little bit previous to him actually moving in, because I missed my mom, and my mom always smoked, and my mom smelled like cigarettes. So when I would smoke a cigarette and I would smell the cigarette smoke, it'd remind me of my mom. So I started smoking. That summer after that boy moved in, I was very deep in my own mental health issues and wasn't getting really good help, and I was very alone. And so I snuck an Angry Orchard from my dad's fridge and split it with my friend at the time. It was so gross, we chased it with root beer. Mm-hmm. So nasty. I still am good. Now, now if you were to hand me one, which please no thank you, but I could drink it like apple juice. Yeah. But at the time, it was like, why do adults like this? I do not understand. But what I did know is that it changed how people felt, and it changed how they acted. Growing up, a lot of the times when my mom would drink, I would see her get happy. And I just wanted to be happy. And then, so that was that first drink. And then the second time I drank was with my foster brother. There was a lot of stuff going on. So he took me to his friend's house, and we had been smoking weed. And so already lack of judgment. I was barely 14 at the time. His friend, goes inside his house and brings out like just an entire like Walmart bag full of just bottles of liquor. That was the first time I got blackout drunk. The first time I ever had hard alcohol. I got super blackout drunk. That was also the first night that my foster brother had propositioned that if I do such and such activity, he would give me drugs or alcohol or whatever. Like, he could get weed from his friend, and he would share with me if I did that, right? Mm-hmm. And at the time, that was, I said no, and he didn't push too hard at that time, but eventually it got to a point where there wasn't saying no. I didn't really have that opportunity, and if I did, then I was treated like the bitch, and so that ended up, I spiraled really hard. Through that, there was a lot more stuff that happened in that realm of things. I was drinking often, smoking cigarettes often, slacking on classes, doing all these things. I ended up in North Star when I was 14. December 2014, I was in North Star Behavioral Health, and I was there for, in total, I believe it was 9 months. I spent 3 months in acute, and then I went to RTC for 6 months. It was a very complicated time. My dad, I think in those 9 months, came to see me like 3 or 5 times. So it was really just segregating. At this time, my parents actually still had no idea what was going on. with my foster brother or anything involved in that. They had found out that I had been having sex, and that was kind of like, that's what they knew. Like, they knew of one person and a possible two people in total, and not anything else or anything like that. But anyway, I ended up getting out, and what's really jacked is that, like, my dad, like, I had lost respect for him the day that my dad decided that on my first outing, who's going to be there? The guy that I lost my virginity to? Like, I didn't get the whole dad shows up with a shotgun kind of a thing. I got the dad literally hung a picture of said boy with you and your brothers standing together on your wall right before you get to your room. So you get to look at that every single time you go to bed and every single day you wake up to leave.
Wow.
Yeah. I didn't get that experience. I didn't get protected in that way. That was also when I was 14 years old, after he found out I was having sex. My dad forced me to take my first pregnancy test with him standing directly in front of me, and it turned out to be a false positive. And my dad, who was a very, in light of everything going on politically right now, like, it's kind of crazy, but, my dad was a very conservative man. He didn't, yes, he was in the medical field, but he did not necessarily believe in abortion. And being 14 years old, terrified, and having your father scream at you, "I'm taking you to the abortion clinic tomorrow and getting that thing out of you because you're a fucking slut." It was really degrading, and my dad denies it to this day. I tried to confront him about that later when he was trying to, tell me his views on abortion and stuff, and I was like, "Well, you wanted me to get an abortion." And he was like, "No, I didn't." And I was like, "Want to bet?" You don't really forget that, you don't forget that situation. My dad just told me that I was lying. That's fine. That's my dad's truth, but I know my truth and what was reality for me.
Not to interrupt you,
No,
that's
you're
very
good.
typical in those situations where you have somebody who's, an air quote, upstanding citizen,
Mm-hmm.
and they're confronted with something they did that if people found out they did would, completely destroy their identity.
Absolutely, yeah.
I know some people very close to me who went through some similar things, so and I'm sure you have developed a support system now where people believe you,
Yes.
and they don't think that you were lying. So I'm glad that you confirmed it, because I was going to say, if you don't, you do have people in this building who believe that happened to you. So
I appreciate that a lot. Once again, at this point, I did not have any respect for my dad. He didn't protect me like he said he was going to, because it was my fault that everything was happening to me the way that it was. It wasn't that he wasn't home to know what was going on, and when he was home, he was drunk, whether or not he wants to admit that today. He just wasn't, he was checked out mentally. I can't say that I was, neglected or anything. I had clothes on my back, food on my table, roof over my head, bills were paid. I got, to go on vacation, things like that. It's not like I was going without the way that I was when I was living with my mother. So, I didn't know any different. I only knew different when I would tell my friends, and they would be shocked at some of the things going on. It was really hard for me to process. So once I got out of North Star, it wasn't very long until things started back up again, except this time I had no friends. I had no social network. I wasn't allowed to use the phone. I wasn't allowed to use the computer. I was homeschooled, and I wasn't allowed to take on-site classes. So I was home 24/7. And my parents were never home because, once again, I wouldn't even get, a hello, how are you? I was very isolated. My foster brother was still in school. He got to go to high school and have a high school experience, and I didn't. So I was alone most of the time. I was expected to do my schoolwork on my own, I was expected to do the now larger list of chores that was left for me because I had the time now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, it wouldn't, the parent that was supposed to be home would normally not be home until like 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, when we were supposed to be in bed by like 10. So, a lot of shit was able to happen throughout that time that went really unnoticed. Eventually it became, I almost dropped out of high school, frankly, that first year, because my foster brother had convinced me, because he eventually ended up in the homeschool I was in as well. That was my sophomore year. I had a GPA of like 1.2. It was really bad, going from a decent student to completely failing out of high school. But then my junior year came around, and my parents allowed me to take on-site classes because I had proven myself at this point, right? Not that they had. I just got way more sneaky, so like they, once again, turned a blind eye, whatever. I got to go to Wasilla High for 2 classes, and I got to do a couple on-site at Matsu Central, some classes there. And I was in this class called Human Relations with a wonderful teacher named Deb Haynes. It was basically like group therapy for high schoolers.
Wow.
It was really interesting, actually. Like, we learned about meditation, and we had to do this timelines assignment where we literally talked about like our life and the things that have happened. I learned about, making a mental box, right? Like building that box to be able to put your stuff in and like shove it to the side. Like that's where I learned about that for the first time. And yeah, I got my first job that year working at Matsu Central as a barista. And I figured out that if I worked hard enough during the school week and I went to work and did all the things right, then I could go to my friends' houses on the weekend and get completely wasted. They didn't care so long as I showed up at 8 o'clock on Sundays. And, obviously I couldn't smell like anything, so I had to, make sure that was neat and tidy and all that jazz. I had worked hard enough my junior year to catch up on all of my sophomore classes and credits and actually do enough that I needed to do very bare minimum for my senior year so I could spend more time working, saving up to leave my parents' house, which was awesome, right? That was the goal. So I only took like a couple classes. I believe they were all elective. Come into the second semester of my senior year, everything that me and my foster brother had been hiding from my parents came to light. Just everything. The sexual abuse, the sexual trauma, the lying, the sneaking around, the substance abuse, the I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine situation. I've had therapists call it, basically he was my pimp and I was his prostitute. So I don't know how I feel about that comparison, so to speak. This time it was my foster brother's turn to go to North Star. So now it's just me in the home with my little sisters. And I very rarely see my parents at this point. I think I see them in passing, like, consistently. Like, it would be like a very superficial, like, tension could be cut with, like, I don't even, like a feather. Like, wow. If that makes sense. Like, it was so tense every single time, and the anxiety and the fear every single time I was around my parents. And to be cornered in a bathroom and you have all these things going on and everything's being shown to light, all of this stuff going on, and then you're being cornered in the bathroom by your stepmother being told, do I need to go make a police report? Is this actually rape? Like, it's a yes or no answer. There's no black and white. And I know now that there's very much a black and white. There's so much of a gray area when it comes to sexual abuse and harassment and coercion and all of these things that I was too young to understand, and her as a medical professional in the line of work she's in should know and did not. And if she did, then she turned a blind eye because it was happening in her home, which was, it sucked to say the least.
Of course.
And, I was, did as I was always told to do, and I was trying to make the family good, and I was trying to patch everything together and be the perfect kid once again to try to make everything right. And, but my substance abuse had kind of gone crazy at this point, and it wasn't being hidden very well. Eventually, my parents they gave up. I was allowed to go to friends' houses. The longer I could stay there, the better, because the less they had to deal with me. When it came to I was a couple months from graduating. I don't know why, but for some reason we had to, I believe I got told that if I wanted to have a sleepover that weekend, and it was my friend at the time's birthday, if I wanted to have a sleepover, it needed to be at our house, which was first off weird, super weird. They never wanted us home, or me home at the very least by this point, because I'm the only, teenager left. And so me and my friends devised a plan, right? So we figured out how to get alcohol that night. We figured out how to get weed. And it wasn't too far into like our partying of that night when my dad figured out what we were doing. We got into a very heated argument, and he pushed me. And, I'm not sure if it was the fact that my friends were staying there or the fact that he was acting the way that he was in front of my friends, the embarrassment, the adrenaline, just everything else going on. I exploded. I finally started to fight back as far as, verbally and, not just take it anymore. My dad accused me of being on meth because I was fighting back. He threatened to punch me, all these things. And then he told me, he was like, you're going to start paying rent and you're grounded. And I was like, I'm not going to pay rent somewhere I don't want to live. And he was like, then you can leave. So I left. All of us at this point have been kicked out all the teenagers have been kicked out by the age of 17. And so I went and stayed a couple nights with my stepdad and his now wife, who's the person I call mom today, and, one of my moms. And then I ended up moving in with my best friend at the time because her mom really wanted me to finish high school because I would have had to transfer with half a credit left. And I was in the process of doing a CNA class to get my certification to take that with me after I left high school. And so I went and I stayed with her. And that's just high school. So, yeah.
Wow. What point did you cross paths with my house? Let's go to that point now.
All right. So I got to my house when I was 21 years old, so roughly 3 years later. I had been in and out of psychiatric units at this point. I was very deep in addiction and had no control of my mental health in any way. I was going in and out of psychosis, having super bad paranoid thoughts, and I just thought, I just need to get out of my parents' house. So I was living with my stepdad and his wife, so I and my siblings again, and I was there for about a year until things got really bad for me mentally, and I ended up going to the psych ward 3 times in about 4 months. My brain was telling me things were happening that I still don't know whether or not they were real. And so I had heard about my house actually when I was around 16. I had a friend come through here. He did your guys' housing. So I knew you guys had housing. And then at this point as well, I had a friend who was in the psych ward with me. She was also applying for your guys' program. And
I do remember that.
Yep. And it just, it ended up working. I knew about this place. I didn't know all of what it could offer. But I knew I just needed to be out of my parents' house, right? So I made the application, had that filled out and everything. I did my interview, and I got told that, I could come out. I could come stay with you guys. I just had to be sober, which I agreed to at the time. Looking back, I had no intention of being sober, to say the least. I had one night where I was in between, right? So I got out of the hospital. I went and packed my stuff, and then my friend who was actually with me the day that I got kicked out, it was the girl whose birthday it was on the night that I got kicked out of my dad's house. She came and picked me up, and I stayed the night at her house. I got very wasted that night because I was one last hurrah, right?
Yep.
I just turned 21. I wasn't even 21 for a month. It was crazy. Yeah, that's when my house got into the picture. And then I was not the best client, so to speak.
So you moved into transitional housing.
I did.
And how long were you in transitional housing?
In total, I want to say it was less than 3 months. It was just that summer from around June 1st till it was June 1st to July 20 something, July 27th, I believe, To say the least, I got introduced to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous through my house. While in transitional living, I had one of the house mom at the time. She noticed I was struggling really bad, and she asked me one night, "Do you want to go to a meeting?" And I said yes, and because I didn't want to be home.
Mm-hmm.
So I was drunk, so I didn't want to be home because continuing to mess up my life and not wanting to take accountability. So I got into the rooms that night, and I ended up having to leave early because I was given How It Works, which is the longest thing you have to read at the beginning of a meeting. The woman who was chairing that meeting actually ended up being my first sponsor. I asked her that night, and she didn't respond to me that day. I went again the next night, and she looked me dead in the face, and she said, "Are you absolutely willing to do anything and everything to stop drinking alcohol?" And I said, yes, because sure, why not? I was not ready. At this time, also, I was really just going downhill, and I had been given the opportunity to get into inpatient treatment through True North Recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And the case managers, like, you guys really just fully, really plowed that train, so to speak. Like, I remember Justin was calling them almost every day, if not every day at one point, because, I don't even know I was a hot mess. Let's just say that. Struggling significantly.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and it wasn't just one of you guys. It was literally all of you guys. From the night that I lost my grandfather to the morning of me going to Vita Nova, which is the residential program through True North. It was just all of you guys, there for me, trying to hold me accountable, which I would not listen to. I was more than willing to cry and tell you how it was everybody else's fault, first off. And everything else was the problem. And then I was to actually admit that I really did have a problem. I was, when I went to Vita Nova, I was introduced to AA. I was, and also another thing was I at one point had been evicted from the transitional living due to my actions. But I was told that because I had a week left or 2 weeks left before I got into Vita Nova, and Justin had told me, just stay sober and you can stay here. So I just got more sneaky and stayed less time at housing. And it, looking back, it's all good to chuckle at, but it was really sad. I was bringing a lot of people down with me. It wasn't just me that was struggling in that house, and I was not a good friend. But, I got into Vita Nova, and I was there for about a month, and then who would have thought that I wasn't ready to be willing yet? And long story short, I got asked to leave that program, but I was able to reapply in 30 days. So I went and stayed with my mom and my stepdad again for those 30 days. And then I went back, and then I fell in love again. And what actually ended up having me leave that time was not, it was my actions. I had relapsed on self-harm, and that program is a 3.1. They are not set up legally, liability, none of that. They're not trained for that at all. It's not their drive. So I got medically discharged that night, and I went and stayed with my first sponsor, which was interesting, to say the least. I was very much a dry drunk at this point. I wasn't too into recovery, but I wasn't too out of recovery either. I had relapsed once or twice for a single night, right? I remember telling you that one day. I was like, I have 30 days, but I relapsed twice. And you were like, okay, but how many days did you relapse in that relapse? And I was like, just one. And you were like, see, that's good. And I was like, cool.
Yes.
So that was cool to hear. You guys were always still super supportive, every time I came in. And that always meant a lot to me, because I thought that I really, really messed up. And I did, but I it was just one of those things where it's I've just been taught that, when you mess up, you don't get to have good people in your life. And you guys have stayed in my life, one way or another. And it's really cool for me. I had talked to another one of the case managers, and, I was just like, I really want to get into treatment again. This place isn't right for me. This isn't what I need. I really just need recovery, and I need that. Like, I just need a place to stay, because it was middle of spring, super sloshy, gross, cold, freezing out. And, I was allowed to stay on the couch. There wasn't a bed at the time, but I was allowed to stay on the couch, which meant a significant amount to me. And I did. I tried really hard to stay sober. I promise you, I tried really hard to stay sober for like a solid day.
I believe that.
But, I didn't have a solution in any way. And I got to my jumping off point for sure there. I was avoiding you guys like the plague. I would not come in. I was able to stay for about 2 weeks instead of just that weekend. I was in the process of getting into treatment. I got reassessed at True North Recovery at a 3.5 this time instead of a 3.1. I started doing the paperwork for Set Free, kind of doing the paperwork for that. I tried. I really did. I didn't know how to do it, and asked because every time I needed to ask, I was already stoned, so I didn't want to come into the building. So I would stay out like as late as possible. Like, I literally would just come back to sleep and then to wake up to leave, because I didn't want to continue that cycle that I had previously, but I didn't know how to stop the cycle I was in. So, and I was going to meetings. And I had also gotten a different sponsor by this point, someone who I really connected with when I was in the rooms, and she's my kind of crazy all the way. At one point during that 2 weeks, I was so desperate to stay sober. I just wanted to stay sober, and I couldn't. Like, I was literally like, so I called her and I was like, hey, I called you before I drank this time. And she's like, first off, proud of you for that. Second, how can I help? And I was like, I can't stay sober tonight. What do I do? And she's like, go get your book and read for 5 minutes. And I was like, okay, I can do that. She's like, all right, call me back in 5 minutes. So I hung up the phone and I stared at the same sentence for about 3 minutes. And then I scrolled through Facebook for about 2. And then I called her and she was like, so how'd it go? I was like, honestly, I can't even hear it. I can't read it. I can't focus. All I can think about right now is that obsession. So she was like, get your shoes on. It was like 11:30 at night. Keep in mind, curfew at transitional housing is like 10. She came and picked me up and drove me to the parking lot at high noon, which is a meeting here in town. And she read me the first 2 chapters of the big book. And I stayed sober that night, which was a miracle in itself. I did not stay sober the next night. But I got it finally in my head that I was able to stay sober if I did something that she told me to do. And so 2 weeks had gone by of me staying in transitional housing again. And I get a text from one of the case managers saying that, hey, it's been 2 weeks. It was supposed to be a weekend. You need to come in and we need to talk about this. We figure out what the next step is. And the previous day, an old staff member from Vita Nova, I had ran into her at a meeting, and she had told me that there was a crisis program through Set Free, and that where she worked now. And so I ended up calling her that next morning because I was bright and early stoned that morning and didn't want to come into the office. And because all you guys know when I'm not sober. And so I called her and she got me in contact with the program manager there at that program that day. And she told me, you can come in tomorrow at 10 a.m. And so I packed up all my stuff that night. I slept one more day. I had been sober from alcohol at this point in time for 3 days, which was an extent in itself, or 2 days by the time. And then I went to that crisis program, and I got to stay in this beautiful little cottage for all by myself for 10 days. And during that 10 days, they helped me finish the application for Set Free and then also apply for this place called Dina Akoi, which is through South Central Foundation. And it was a 90-day program versus Set Free's 6-month to 9-month program. And I was like, well, this one sounds better. And,
always.
Always less time. And it was the best decision I ever made. And I was able to really just focus on myself. I realized in that 2 weeks that I was staying at my house again that, you know, I did not want that life anymore that I had. And like, I saw the lives you guys had. I saw the lives that people had in the rooms, like, and I knew what to do. I just didn't know how to do it. So I finally just started doing it instead of trying to overthink it. You know, now I have, from that day that I stopped drinking then, I had about 10 days sober when I was in crisis recovery program for 7 days because I had 10 days sober by the time that I left. So today's day 115.
Woo!
Right? Before, the most amount of sober time I had put together was about 68 days. So I'm almost double right now.
That's excellent.
And the night and day difference of where I was at that 68 days compared to where I am today is significantly different in working a program and, you know, finding my higher power. Like, my higher power is very different than I think most people's. And that's perfect for me because, you know, that's what I need in my life. But my higher power showed up for me in so many ways between, you know, introducing me to my house, to, you know, friggin' my house having the grace and understanding that you guys do to allow me back for that 2 weeks. Like, because if I hadn't gotten back there, I don't even know where I'd be today. You know, like, I genuinely don't. And, you know, being able to come in here and like tell you guys thank you for everything that you've done and like genuinely mean that and be able to show you that I'm here differently today. I'm so much better. Like, I don't wake up wanting to cry or not wake up. Like, I wake up excited about the next day. I go to sleep prepared. Like, I have a life today that I don't know I would have been able to have if I didn't get sober the way that I did and I didn't have you guys helping me along. I don't know the way that life would have worked. I think life worked out exactly the way that it was supposed to, by divine intervention. And I'm so grateful. So freaking grateful. And I'm not looking at you because I'm trying not to cry. So
No worries. That is why we do what we do.
Yeah.
What, if you had to pick one thing, one moment, one memory, one experience, one feeling, what was the most impactful thing has been with my house?
Okay, I got like two. I can't pick between them because they're both very significant to me. The day that I had to go to the hospital when my grandfather passed away, you know, you and Kira coming and getting me, talking me through that, taking me to the hospital because I refused to get on an ambulance. And, you know, I remember vaguely asking you to hold my hand, and you held my hand and just walked me through that. And then the next day, me being so embarrassed and so just baffled at my own self, and just being, you know, shown love and grace and kindness, and not being belittled or, you know, pushed to the side or told, well, we gave you that chance, right? You fucked it up. So, you know, or actually the night that I got technically evicted from housing, I came home super intoxicated once again. And my friend, who I was not helping in any way, she ended up having to go to the hospital that night. And Justin had to come back to the house, and he let us know, like, you guys are done. It's over. Like, it's been months of this at this point. Like, I can't keep letting this happen. And I totally understand looking back. But at that night, me being super drunk and thinking this was the best idea in the world, I locked myself in a bathroom and tried to end my life. Not very successfully in any way, but the compassion and the kindness once again from Kira and from Justin. Like, Justin helped clean up my wrists. He bandaged me up and he told me, like, you can't keep going back to because I was like, I just tried to kill myself, send me to Providence, because that was my drunk brain's way of like, how am I not going to be homeless, right? He's like, you can't keep going back to this, and I'm going to pray for you, and we're going to help you, but you have to let us help you. That is really, like, those two memories have really like driven me for a minute and shown me that kindness exists, love exists, and it's not because you have to necessarily earn it. And it means the world to me. It really does. And it helps me every day. Like when I get really low on myself and I'm like, oh, I should be doing this way. It's like, or when I get judgmental towards other people, it's like, no, I don't have a right to be judgmental. Look at where I was, and these people were still able to care for me and, not hate me and, show me kindness and genuine just care. And being able to come back the other day and like tell you guys I graduated treatment, I have all these days sober, and like, I'm in sober living now. I'm in outpatient treatment. I'm about to get a job here soon. I get a car this weekend, by the way.
What?
Yeah, I get my own car.
Congratulations.
And like I get to start school in the fall. I get to have all of these things, and I would have. Like, frankly, I would have never gone to treatment, like, in the first place if you guys hadn't suggested it. I would have never done any of these things had you guys not been there. And I have all these things today genuinely because of your guys' grace and kindness and your willingness to not give up on me, which I haven't had before.